right, everybody, welcome to our sixth Southern Steelhead Coalition meeting. Yay! Thank you guys for all coming here today. So we're gonna have a really cool meeting. I'm gonna start off real quick because we have some people who need to go and do some fabulous things. So for today, we'll do some quick hello and updates, just about some events we'll do in the future. Um, and then we'll have our speaker, Garrett Altmann, talk about watershed-scale restoration following wildfire to promote native salmonid habitats. Then we'll have a question and answer time for Garrett. He will not be able to stick around to the end if there's more questions needed, but you probably will be able to email him if you have any pressing questions. Next will be our standing item, our coalition partner prioritized project updates. And then restoration projects that coalition members have considered and maybe want to talk about, maybe getting assistance with, or getting partnerships with in the coalition or with the coalition. And then we'll have open discussion announcements. And I really hope we'll be able to do this today because I think that's the best time to just let everyone talk freely. All right, so next for the planning and updates. So we are planning a coalition outing later in 2025 in the San Ynez, and this will just be for coalition members, and it will be led by our tribal coordinator, Elena Rios. That way you guys will be able to get to know her better and understand her role with the coalition and what she does best. And more details will come in 2025. We're still planning it currently right now. I'm going to do some project sites, so be on the lookout for that. We're also planning to do a really cool event with Amanda Begley and the Tree People. It's going to be a great event, but it's going to be for the general public. So we'll let you know more information when we have that down too, but just keep your eyes open. I'm really excited to do with Tree People. I think it'll be great. It's like educating people about the Santa Clara River and Steelhead and the Safe Water Program. Okay, and that, like I said, more details to come later when we have it better. We have everything nailed down. Okay, so next will be if you have if you want to tell me more about what you would like this coalition to do, we always have the survey. You can find it on our web any PowerPoint slides and update it, and I'll try to tailor the meeting so you guys get a lot more out of this meeting of what you want to see. So when you're here for an hour and a half, it also benefits you and other coalition members that you might think they need to know more information or have us delve into. And our next meeting date will be March 12th in 2025. Same bat time and same bat channel. At 10:30 to 12 p.m. All right. And feel free to send this meeting invites to all interested parties, stakeholders, community members, anybody who you think might want to be here that won't disrupt the meeting. All right. So with that, let's start off with our speaker, Garrett Altmann from Western Restoration Program Manager at the Environmental Policy Innovation Center, talking about watershed-scale restoration techniques to promote native salmonid habitat following the wildfires. All right. I'm going to stop sharing, and then, yeah, go ahead, Garrett.
Cool. Thanks, Elizabeth, and welcome everybody. Thanks for having me today, and I'm excited to talk to you and share some of the experiences I've had working with the tribe out in New Mexico. And while it's not within the Southern California steelhead footprint, I think a lot of the lessons are transferable, just given the nature of wildfires impacting these ecosystems and using a lot of the recovery strategies that have been applied and innovated out here, I think will be transferable to some of the areas there. As we know, fires are a frequent occurrence, as we're seeing in Malibu right now, and I hope everybody in that area is safe. Let me get this slideshow going. I did include a lot of pictures for everybody today because I think that's the most powerful form of communication. So I will try and fly through these pretty quick because I have a lot of slides. But just starting with wildfire, as I mentioned, it's ubiquitous across forested and chaparral landscapes. While it is a natural occurrence, we have the ability to alter that significantly. Majority of ignitions are human caused. And our century plus of fuel management has even increased the potency or we'll just leave it at that, as the potency of our forests and their ability to burn and not just burn at low to moderate intensity, but burn severely and have detrimental impacts on their respective ecosystems. In Southern California, we see the predominant ecotype being chaparral landscapes. Chaparrals are more frequent, have a more frequent fire interval And we see that, literature says 15 to 90 years, but I've seen areas in Malibu burn on the 3 to 5 year interval in places, especially in those areas that are heavily inundated or heavily vegetated with grasses. Moving out here, and for today's presentation, we'll be using a case study of a fire impacted area on tribal lands in the Santa Clara Pueblo of New Mexico. Santa Clara Pueblo is a U.S. federally recognized tribe, meaning that they are responsible for maintaining their own government, health services, schools, infrastructure, you name it. They currently have 90 square miles of land, and it's governed by a community of approximately 1,600 tribal members. The Pueblo lands, just for folks who aren't familiar with Indian Pueblos versus reservations, they were established during the 16th century Spanish colonization. Essentially, the church was placed in the middle of the community, and in return, the tribes were granted 2 leagues in each direction, which equates to about 3 miles or 9 square miles. You can see on this map, all these gray squares are the neighboring pueblos. Some have the original 9 square miles, like Okewinga to the north. Others have annexed additional tribal trust lands, such as Sanai to the south. And some have trust lands that are not even in the Rio Grande Basin here. So it enables the tribes to manage their ancestral lands, being located with the Pueblos being located on their ancestral lands, but also trust lands that are acquired can fall within the ancestral territory, but maybe not be immediately adjacent. The Santa Clara Creek Watershed, not to be confused with the Santa Clara River Watershed, which we toured last year with the coalition, is a quite remarkable watershed out here. It's 32,000 acres in size, and it includes a 23-mile west to east trending perennial stream that flows from the Jemez Mountains to the Rio Grande. It's central to life physically and culturally for the Pueblo people. It previously sustained both rainbow and Rio Grande cutthroat trout. There were 4 recreational fishing ponds that were developed in the 50s and 60s by Bureau of Indian Affairs, originally for flood mitigation and irrigation, but they became predominantly relied upon for recreational fishing, which eventually became the primary economic revenue source for the tribe, as these ponds were open to the general public, and the area became renowned for its recreational opportunities as much as its pottery that is well known in the area. I will travel when I come to California, then people say, "Oh, you worked with Santa Clara. We went out there as a kid camping and fishing. Is that area still open?" It has a tremendous amount of recognition up through 2000 when the fires first started impacting this watershed. I did source this image from before the fires. This was in 2010 in the upper watershed. This is the uppermost of the 4 ponds and the smallest of them. But you can see a continuously forested landscape. It's not chaparral, it is mixed conifer and broadleaf forest. However, it is a vital source water for the Rio Grande. Taking a look at the history of fire impacts in the area, you can see starting in 1998 with the red polygon to the north, the Oso fire, then the purple being the 2000 Cerro Grande fire, which made national headlines impacting Los Alamos National Laboratory and the community of Los Alamos. And then again in 2011 with the blue polygon being the Las Conchas fire, which is the largest fire in state history at the time. And now is, third, possibly fourth after this summer in the history of the state as far as fire sizes are concerned. And this is really representative of what we're seeing with these catastrophic fires from Alaska to California, Colorado, Arizona. We're seeing these larger, more intense fires that are occurring across the landscape. This isn't just a one-off experience. So again, applicability in other regions beyond what we're looking at here today. And then to the left, we do have a burn severity map that was provided after this fire. You can see the dark orange and red to the westernmost portions of the tribal area were moderate to high intensity fire. And what this did was really have profound effects on the soil and the vegetation, of course, that burned in the process. What we had in this fire was a really what they call a stand replacing canopy fire, where the fire was burning through the canopy at high rates of speed. God, what is the statistic that when that fire started, they were saying over an acre a second was burning when this fire erupted near Los Alamos. By the time it reached the Pueblo about 11 days later, it still had these runs that were just remarkably intense and severe. We've seen it in multiple fires other places, and the chaparral ecosystems are prone to that more frequently than we see out here in other areas. So it's talking about the impacts of the fire on the vegetation and the soil. One other factor we have with the geology in this area is it's relic of a caldera complex. So rich in volcanic substrate, lots of pumice and poorly consolidated material, not a lot of boulders in the upper watershed. And what that created were conditions that were highly erosive to flooding that came after these fires. The year of the fire, there were a few small events. I believe we exceeded 2,000 CFS that first year. However, in 2013 were the biggest events. They had 50-year precipitation events out in the region. This was a week after the Boulder, Colorado, and the Front Range flooded. The week before, excuse me, this area was flooding. They received 13 inches of rainfall over 3 days. Exceeded 11,000 CFS in 2013 on the floods, and then subsequent flooding and debris flows all the way again till this year. We had another event after nearly a decade of things calming down. So to show that not only do these events erupt immediately following a fire, but here we are over a decade later, and we're still seeing impacts of that fire with the precip events we have. This image on the right with the red outlines was done during a geotechnical survey. They estimated that 3 to 4 million cubic yards of sediment were still poised within these two tributaries that could come down and impact the creek anytime. Unfortunately, that's what we saw this summer when this area was impacted with a rainfall event. Previously, though, this is the 4 ponds that I mentioned before after the flood events. Fourth pond you can see in the lower right corner. Still a portion of it left, but that did again flood and inundate with debris, and the dams breached. So, cascading disasters from fires to rainfall events and flood events to debris flows. The impacts of these were quite detrimental to the Pueblo. All 4 dams and ponds and dams were filled and breached. The canyon roadway and all the crossings were destroyed. Infrastructure losses exceeded 200 million through estimates from the Army Corps of Engineers. And ecologically, we had 100% fish kill and beaver kill in the watershed. There was one colony of beavers that did survive the first 5 years of flooding, but they succumbed to predation 5 to 7 years after the fire. So now we have no beaver in the watershed to this day. In addition to that, culturally, the tribe is so reliant on these lands for their cultural belief system and pilgrimages and just recreation and connecting with the land. And to lose that over the last 20 years, when I have 20 of the last 24 years, has been detrimental to the community and the emotional health of the community. There's been a generational disconnect with the youth who haven't been able to experience this area. They just hear about it from their parents and grandparents. So we're really working now to try and get the youth back up in there and participate in our restoration processes. In addition to the response to disasters being a huge burden on a small government that it's already limited in capacity. Here's a couple images from this summer from the June event we had. Again, we received 7.5 inches in 3 hours on June 20th of this year. And the impacts, we lost all 11 temporary road crossings. The temporary road that was built following the floods a decade ago that was just being reevaluated for permanency, completely inundated. Aerial image on the left from a helicopter recon, and this image on the right is as far up as we could get into the canyon, and just looking at what's left of our road crossings and figuring out how can we redesign and rebuild these so we don't have to go through this time and time again. So the tribe's recovery is really centered on collaboration and restoration at the watershed scale, and ultimately looking at a more natural way to do things. And to do that, we're really trying to leverage indigenous knowledge, nature-based solutions, and process-based restoration. Um, but above that really is community safety. That's been the priority since the start. That's been the priority for the tribal leadership, the Army Corps of Engineers, the NRCS, and all our partners. So really working with these partners to identify who can do what and leveraging them to be more efficient. The other lesson as a best practice that I want to highlight here is this top-down approach under bullet 2 there. We learned that you can't restore the creek before you stabilize the tributaries. And you can't stabilize the tributaries until you stabilize the vegetation that's contributing to those and allowing the water to flow. So it really became a top-down approach to treating the watershed as something we learned on our own. Immediately after the fires, the Army Corps of Engineers did implement a few emergency measures. The first being four debris fences or geobrug fences that were originally designed for avalanches in the Swiss Alps. And they're now being applied here in North America in a lot of post-fire areas, using them on Interstate 70 in Colorado after the fires up there. The EPA has been really interested in the impacts of these. And the image on the left is actually from June of this summer with that 14-foot tall fence that's approximately 70 feet wide, fully inundated and turned it into a waterfall. But it did hold a lot of sediment behind it and protected the roadway for people traveling below. The image on the right is one of 3 gabion dams. That middle trough that's filled with sediment is actually a scour trough, so that when these things flood in big events, the water is intended to dissipate the energy in that scour trough and then disperse out at a lower rate of speed with the goal of increasing evacuation time for the community below. They put 3 of these in succession, ultimately increasing the evacuation time for the community. Before the fires, they said it was 3.5 hours for the water to reach the village from the upper watershed. After the fires, it was 45 minutes. So during a flood event, that's not a lot of evacuation time. Unfortunately, these gabion dams have been detrimental for fish passage. While they have emergency utility, they lack any 1 to 2 year event flow or connectivity, and they create huge vertical drops on the downstream side, in addition to becoming huge maintenance issues for sediment. I'm going to run through these quick, but I will make this presentation available to folks who want to look into these detail. But indigenous knowledge, just really working in harmony with the earth, and understanding that there's value in the natural processes that are occurring, whether it be fire, whether it be flooding. There's things lessons to be learned from all of those. Prioritizing ecosystem services. And then one thing that I've learned working with Santa Clara in the past was the limit of introducing foreign materials. When I started a big FEMA project in the upper watershed, the cultural committee and tribal leadership, their number one priority was to not introduce concrete to that area. It was a sacred area. They wanted to keep it that way, and they wanted it natural. Nature-based solutions, more a term that's evolved in the last 5 years that we used to refer to as bioengineering or engineering with nature. But you'll see a lot of these concepts are synonymous. They really rely on leveraging these natural processes, creating habitat complexity and diversity, developing resilience. So when we have these periods of flooding or periods of drought, that we don't lose our infrastructure, we're able to adapt and maintain, especially like fish connectivity through these structures. And then ultimately working for nature positive results, which this figures from the UN climate conference in Egypt 2 years ago. Process-based restoration, again, trying to address this widespread degradation of the landscape in North America, thousands of miles of riverscapes in poor and fair condition, whether it be from transportation networks, grazing, channelization, flood mitigation, you name it. That we've sort of taken this post-World War II, we need to conquer nature in order to live with it. And I think we're seeing a paradigm shift now. I really believe we do, that we can actually recognize the value of these processes and learn to leverage them, and understanding that floodplain connectivity is going to reduce the flood impacts to infrastructure downstream. With a lot of the stuff I'll look at here in the upcoming slides, there's a lot of hand-built, low-tech, cost-effective structures that can be applied in these systems. And I just want to make folks aware that there's a certain scale that they're intended to address, and typically that 1 to 3 year event, your average rain flows, a big thunderstorm you get every year. But when you're having these outlier events that have just really high intensity precipitation and quantity events, they're not going to last and withstand that. So it's just be aware to set your expectations appropriately. However, you can engineer your structures to facilitate these larger events. The tribe really ultimately came up with this naturalistic approach to watershed restoration, and it's intended to develop resilience, increase water storage, create habitat, and satisfy both the cultural priorities and enhance the ecosystems in the area. Watershed scale strategies. I mentioned the top-down approach, working at the top with fuel breaks and mulching and mastication, stabilizing those erosion sources up top before they reach the creek. And then also maximizing your riparian sources. Where you have incisions, are there areas to dam that up and agrade it and spread that water out and slow it? And then also work toward long-term sustainability. Consider fire in areas that haven't burned. Mechanical treatments as well, flash grazing with cattle, invasive species management, and then a lot more infrastructure designs based toward resilience and looking at the whole spectrum of climate variability we're prone to, and how can we design road crossings in particular that are resilient to low flows and then catastrophic high flows. Ultimately, we do want to work toward beaver and trout reintroduction, with beaver slated to be reintroduced in this year, and Rio Grande Cutthroat within the next 2 years. A map just with an overview of the efforts, starting on the outside of the boundary with the National Park Service lands and U.S. Forest Service to the north and south. Tribe is engaged with both of those agencies on co-management activities. So working beyond the boundaries to address issues to, one, limit resilience for future fire events, but also contribute to those ecosystems that are often backlogged in maintenance or fall within a jurisdiction that is so extensive that those agencies can't treat all of those areas. Within the boundary, you can see the green areas are mulching and mastication up into the west. Those were additionally planted with hundreds of thousands of conifer seedlings. All the little dots in the tributaries are points of erosion structures that were hand-built. To date, we've actually treated 32 of these tributaries with over 7,000 hand-built structures. The red diamonds are those debris fences I mentioned, and the blue polygons downstream to the eastern half of the reservation are fuel management areas where we do prescribed fire and mechanical thinning. Let's get into the good pictures here. Sediment management. Been a lot of innovation going on up in these areas, primarily where we lacked any substantial rock. A lot of the post-fire recommendations we received from the burned area response teams from Department of Interior were based on building rock dams. And in these areas where you see there's a lot of pumice and really small sediment, we didn't have that. So our crews were able to innovate and say, well, we don't have rocks, but we've got burned timber everywhere. How can we utilize that? And we've determined that when you can stabilize it or even just apply it in rudimentary areas like this incision on the right, it provides scaffolding for that material, and it actually holds together very well. That poorly consolidated material on its own, highly erosive, but when you give it some structure, it really glues together this woody debris, and future events don't impact it on the surface as much. You actually have better distribution of energy on the water surface, but also aggradation of these incisions. We see anywhere from 30 to 70% aggradation in the incisions where we've applied these treatments. And one of the great things monitoring these things and coming back to them year after year is seeing the water table rebound with them, and the vegetation therefore come back, and the migratory wildlife utilize these areas again. So, pretty simple stuff, but profound impacts over the years. Some more examples of using rocks and also treating head cuts right at the erosion sources. These log mattresses you can see here on the terraces, as well as what we call trash racks or debris fences. If you put them in succession, they work really well, eventually agrade and limit the depth of that tributary while also capturing your sediment before it goes to the creek. Working toward bank stabilization. You can see the image on the right with some of our youth crews just placing logs in exposed areas to promote fish habitat in the headwaters it reaches. And then on the left being actually engineered drawings by our contractor AECOM on this. And this was a lot of spoon feeding and showing that this could be integrated into their designs. Initially, they just provided generic riprap bank stabilization designs. We said, no, we want more than that. We want to use the rock we have on site. We don't want to import basalt from 70 miles away and the cost. We have all this rock here and we have all these root wads and this woody debris. We want to plant willows. We want to plant alders. Give us some new drawings. And so there's a lot of iterations of work to get this, but we eventually did do this and we're able to get it approved by FEMA and build it. Image on the before on the left and image on the right. This is a confluence with a tributary that was impacting and blowing out the roadway. We armored it with rock. We planted vegetation down below the visibility of this particular image, but really had some success with the federal agencies in adopting a lot of these nature-based or process-based restoration techniques. Some other techniques is just simple contour felling, making sure your trees are falling across or diagonal on the landscape, not vertically aligned with it. We had a private landowner actually come in and plant some grass seed above and that was within, I want to say 6 weeks of that fire on that example on the right, where they were actually able to increase infiltration and get grass growing back by planting some straw on top of the seeds. Working in the stream and really trying to get to our fish habitat. That's been the goal since we started all this work is when can we get the fish back in the stream? That's what the tribal members ask. That's what the people who want to go fishing ask. And it's what we ask as restoration practitioners. Unfortunately, there was so much sediment supply in that stream corridor that we had to wait 7 years to do anything to the creek. And I think it's important that you're cognizant within fire areas that there is a period where you just kind of have to let nature run its course and let geomorphological processes do their thing. It takes time for that sediment to transport. We did have designs and intentions to go and put stuff in. We drew nationwide 27 permits as early as 2017 to put in structures. And then we realized, we're going to build that and it's going to fill up with sediment within weeks, if not days. So we waited and we stabilized those tributaries. By the time we got to the creek, we really worked on trying to expand that wetted perimeter and creating as much riparian habitat as possible so that we could plant shrubs and grasses and really start creating shade and canopy cover to promote cold water refugia. And then extending that into actually building structures in the stream. These are hand-built rock structures, baffles, one rock dams, intended to grade the channel, create pooling, and ideally even spawning redds, riffles. Ponding the water just to slow and spread it and increase that storage and infiltration. We worked with this relic beaver pond complex that was completely blown out and inundated with debris flows. We went in, we had a mini excavator for a couple days, so we just popped a couple holes in this little, what I called a shoebox tributary. It was maybe 8 inches wide, but it was perennially flowing, and it only had vegetation on a foot of either side of this channel. We said, let's slow this water. Let's get some vegetation growing here, and let's create some off-channel refugia so that if the main channel flows, the fish will have a place to be resilient and maintain their populations and repopulate the stream if it is inundated with a debris flow from upstream. Working with logs and stuff. This is not how you do log dams. They look really pretty for the first summer, but I think it's really important that you learn from your lessons. You can't just put a log dam like this or it will undercut. Whether it happens in a month or 2 years, it does undercut. And if you work with logs, you got to put them at least 50% below grade, and then they can be pretty effective. Such as this image on the right, we used a log vein on this spring here to maximize the riparian extent on that. The road crossing below there was a 48-inch CMP culvert before. We upgraded it to a 24-foot span, 6 foot high, arch type culvert. We wanted bottomless, natural bottom for fish passage. That was the primary driver of this crossing, is we knew this was the most viable spawning habitat we have in the watershed. We want to maintain connectivity, but we also want to satisfy those cultural wishes. And the engineers initially gave me designs for a precast concrete crossing that looks like, the Seward exit in Ventura. Like, it's like not what we want in this environment. So they pushed back and said, well, that's what you need here. This is what to have resilience for scour and yada, yada, yada. Ended up, we went to construction on it, and they couldn't get the crane to the site that would install these features. And it's like, yes, thank you. Let's redesign this. Can we do it? And the contractor's like, yeah, let's do this out of stacked stone. I said, well, that's what I originally asked for with the start of this. And they said it was too expensive to do stacked stone, and you wouldn't find contractors that were able to do it. Lo and behold, I found a tribal entity out of the Four Corners area. They had examples in Durango, Colorado, where they built 60-foot retaining walls out of stacked stone. And that's why we selected them, because they were good at it. They were able to come in and push to say, hey, no, you guys can do what you originally wanted. So we paid that designer $70,000 to redesign this crossing, but we did get an arch type crossing with stacked stone. It's not our best stacked stone, but it's the first one we did in the canyon. In addition to it, though, if you're doing a road crossing, include restoration above and below. Don't just treat the crossing, treat the unit as a system. We were able to include, I think, 800 feet of restoration above and below this crossing under FEMA, and the cost was negligible compared to the cost of the crossing. They were very into supporting that and to really sell it as a nature-based solution where you're trying to increase the floodplain connectivity and lower that energy going through the span. This image on the right is a nicer example. This is the second crossing they did. Again, natural bottom culvert. We spent a lot of money doing an arch type culvert on this. If I did it again, I would have just done an 8-foot cylindrical culvert and set it 30% below grade and saved ourselves a lot of money. So again, learning from our lessons and how do we move forward. For folks who are dealing with tributaries that don't have a lot of money to put in concrete footers and highly designed structures, yeah, set those things below grade and buy it a little bigger so you still have that conveyance capacity, but then also you're creating a natural bottom feature so that your aquatic organisms, not just your fish, but all your macroinvertebrates can traverse as well. Moving on from crossings, just looking at how we really try to maximize our riparian habitat. Looking at this drone image of an area with a few springs up here to the upper left of the images, and to the left, this was a big, or to the middle here, this is a big debris deposition area below the narrows of the canyon I showed you earlier. This area had so much material in it, nobody even knew what to do with it. But we did have some funding from the NRCS that allowed us to increase public access in the canyon. And so what we did is we leveraged that money to create recreation access in this area. And we could use a quarter of that funding for habitat habitat incentive programs, so habitat enhancements. And what we did is we looked and we said, hey, let's braid this channel. Let's create some off-channel ponds. Let's extend this 30-foot riparian corridor to 140 feet. We more than tripled the amount of vegetation that's occurring in here now. And this area was looking very nice until June of this year. But to show you that now, it inundated with sediment, but we don't have much to clean out. We can go redig these ponds if we want to, or we can just leave them and let them be a stream channel or a meadow and terrestrialize. That's what beaver ponds do over time. So not trying to like manicure the landscape and keep it a certain way, but be adaptive and understand what works, what doesn't work, and where there are opportunities to recreate some of these structures. Looking at habitat creation and complexity is really what we're ingrained in when we do this stuff. The more, the merrier. If you build it, they will come. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. And, keeping fish in mind is at the top, but also understanding that all these little swales and back channel ponds you create, while they may lack the water quality or depth for fish, they're still great for juvenile fish or for all the bugs that propagate and grow in those areas and provide food sources for those fish when you get them back in. Understanding what alluvial fans do, those are those deposition areas at the mouths of your tributary. Looking at opportunities, well, maybe we can put a pond in one of these or a basin. So instead of having the basin 100 yards upstream, let's go put it near the stream and try and get the stream to come into it and create more habitat. And then if it does flood, then that debris basin acts as a debris basin. But in the meantime, it can act as a pond. And we can do these conceptual designs where we're creating off-channel ponds that create habitat, refugia, and water storage, but then also in a big event would act as a debris catchment basin. This is that alluvial fan I showed you during construction and after construction. You know, not a huge pond, but still some really nice habitat and a great place now where we can reintroduce our beaver and know that they won't be predated immediately, in addition to providing a new pond and water storage in the upper watershed. This concept of off-channel ponds we've, poked around with and under the culvert here with a scale model. And the intent really is so that your sediment bypasses your pond and that this feature serves as almost like a relic oxbow pond. However, water quality is the biggest concern, and how can you maintain cool water temperatures, minimizing sediment, but also maintaining high quality water for fish to reside. This is what we want to do at Fourth Pond, and having a diversion structure that is ingrained that can be overtopped in a big event, but also be adjusted to put all the flows in during low events to get water in. We did our first conceptual trial here using a helicopter dipping pond under an emergency order. We were able to excavate this pond in 2 weeks, and we just haphazardly threw an irrigation diversion in it, and it held for I think 4 years until we had a big event finally come and plug the diversion, and then we were able to extend it this last year and build it much larger. Um, this is that, sorry, this slide was out of order here, but this slide here just showing after the pond's created, another best management practices for folks working in burn areas. Using the woody debris you have available has tremendous impacts on seed catchment, soil moisture, and just recovery. We find areas where we disperse woody debris, we have almost twice the propagation rates of natural grasses and forbs that we do in areas that are void of the wood. Plus all the little insects and ground squirrels start colonizing the area, and you just have a much more robust and faster recovery effort. Back to this pond I wanted to show you. So we extended that original helicopter dipping pond in the upper right here into a larger pond. We just connected them the week before the flood hit, and the image on the bottom there is just a quick from the UTV as we were doing a quick recon of the area. It filled that entire basin up. We lost a lot of diesel that was spent digging that pond out and getting it back to be a good sized pond, and it's sediment all the way to nearly the top of that Gabion Dam. So again, the tribes got under a disaster declaration. This is as high up in the canyon as we're able to access with off-road vehicles. The area is still shut down. FEMA did declare a declaration, and the tribe is currently following that procedure now to get funding to come in and clean these things back out again and sort of repeat the cycle. But the idea is if we can build these ponds so that they're not in channel, that they will provide, decades or longer, or maybe another flood will come and inundate them. But in that case, the sediment is getting captured here and is not flowing into the Rio Grande and impacting the large reservoirs that are located there above Albuquerque. So there's still tremendous cost benefit to the Army Corps of Engineers in maintaining these structures up above. Challenges, water quality and sediment transport it remains the biggest thing. Invasive species, even in these areas where you have low oxygen levels or high phosphorus areas in the first years that water get into these flood areas. How do you quantify subsurface water volume? How much carbon are you sequestering in these wetlands? Those are things we haven't quite been able to tap into yet, but we'd like to. Working with actually building these things, contractor proficiency tends to be a big barrier. Every engineer will tell you they can design this stuff, and a lot of the contractors will tell you they can build it, but there's not many who can do it right. And for folks who are really leaning this way, don't get overconfident in your engineers and your designers. Be scrutinous, bring in other expertise, leverage other resources that are out there, but just be cautious. And then lastly, trying to get the community involved and supportive, and then working with like old dialects, like, hey, it was so great up there. Why can't we build it like it was? It's like, well, if you want to excavate that pond every summer or a couple times per summer at this rate, you could build it like it was, but it won't be as good as it was. So we need to think outside the box. We need to evolve. We need to adapt, and we need to rely on nature as much as possible. So goals, develop a resilient water storage model without the need for dams while creating, maximizing the riparian habitat, creating habitat for beaver and fish. Maybe we just do hundreds of small ponds like we're showing, and like bathtub to vehicle size that are still capable of holding fish and provide great connectivity and have less evaporation than having big, wide, large open water bodies. Connectivity, diversity, those are all like priorities we continually ingrain in everything we do. And then also, again, creating that refugia for the native fish. It is a fish and wildlife surface species of special concern. It's not endangered, but there are only, I think, 28 watersheds where they occur out here in the region. And our watershed being one of those, the more resilient we can make that refugia, the better. Um, Working with tribal entities, increasing the cultural value really is an artifact of increasing the ecological value, something I've learned working with Santa Clara. You make that ecosystem more vibrant and more lively and more animals and more fish, that enriches their culture, enriches their people, and it's just a win-win for both things. So it's nice to have that duality. Resilience, how can we design our roadway crossings so that instead of listening to our engineers saying you need to convey a 50-year event, but you might be able to do a 100-year event. And I'm like, well, we just had another 500-year event, and we're going to just lose that structure. What about just creating it so it conveys 95% of our flows, and then creating an overtop channel with scour protection that is going to be much lower cost, going to be much more resilient, and much more applicable in this system. The tribe doesn't want big infrastructure up there. So how can we think, differently about this stuff, and how can we do that at a national scale too? If folks are interested in this road crossings in particular, our team just got funded by the Pew Foundation to do co-benefits of stream crossings research, looking at changing hydrographs with these increased precipitation, high intensity precipitation events, while also considering both terrestrial and aquatic organism connectivity. Lastly, restore public recreation opportunities and the economic benefits. The tribe relied on this watershed as their primary economic revenue source for 70 years. In 2000, they started a development corporation and moved to movie theaters and golf courses and a hotel and casino now. They didn't want to become a gaming tribe. They wanted to stay on this side of it, but they're sort of economically forced to do that. But they haven't lost sight of trying to go back to that within the canyon and creating that opportunity for the public. Wrapping up, leveraging nature can be cost effective, and there's multiple benefits that come from it. Building partnerships, leveraging expertise, braiding funding from multiple funding sources can really extend your treatment area to the watershed scale. Be reasonable in your expectations, be adaptive, understand, be proud of your failures, learn from them. Don't there's stuff to be learned, and we do advocate a lot of the lessons we've learned are from things that we did wrong. So yeah, it's an evolution and how you approach these techniques. Public participation is great for longevity. You can leverage it as cost share. If you get a group that comes out, you get 30 people and you have them do a sign-in sheet, you can leverage those folks and get, $2,500 worth of cost match just in that volunteer public participation. So thinking outside the box and seeing what can be done and working to be nature positive and tying into global goals. And just to wrap things up, and probably over time here, Elizabeth, but one of our techs we were out in the field transplanting aspen trees, propagating native vegetation, and he's like, "Yo, gee, you know why we're doing this, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, to create shade on the creek to keep the water temperature cold so we can put the fish back in." He's like, "Yeah, but but also, man, because if it's good for the planet, dog, it's ultimately good for us. He's like, you know what I mean, dog? I was like, you're right on, Santi. And so I think it's just, he brought it home from his perspective that it's for the planet, it's for the fish, and it's for us. Thank you for your time, and we can take some questions. I've got 20 minutes, Elizabeth, so we're good on my end.
Thank you so much, Garrett. That was a great presentation. I feel like we learned quite a bit. We are a little pressed for time because we have some standing agenda items. So I think I'm going to leave about 5 minutes for questions. Sorry about that. It's just we got some other stuff we got to get through, some standing agendas. So does anybody have any questions? And if you want to stop sharing your screen, Garrett.
Okay.
Yeah. But thank you for showing your sources.
Yeah, and
Appreciate
my
that.
email's on the cover slide of this. So if folks want to get in touch with me or I'm on the mailing list, happy to reach out. Or if you guys need resources or second eyes, let me know.
Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or speak up now. Well, I guess I can start with a question for you, Garrett. So you talked about using this whole process of reusing local resources, like hyperlocal resources, and getting the contractor to understand that that was really important and that was available. Can you talk a bit more about that process and how you got the contractor to see more of your side or what your specifications were like?
Yeah, so I think I used the example of concrete in the presentation, like being a tribal priority. And even though I made that our priority, they still gave us a concrete structure. So they gave us a survey after the whole contract was done. I gave him nines and tens on everything. And then we got to innovation. I gave him a two. And he's like, what do you mean? We did all these bank stabilization stuff. I said, yeah, but you guys, the first thing on the first day of the kickoff meeting, I told you is we don't want concrete. What did you give us? A gigantic concrete structure. And then I had to pay you to redesign it. Like, that's not how it should work. Like, we should have gone with the stack. We wanted stack stone. You said we couldn't do it. And then we learned we could do it. So you really got to push and work toward that. But another example, like I mentioned with Santi planting that aspen, something we've really learned in just the last couple of years is as these areas restore themselves in fire areas and non-burn areas, when you're doing riparian restoration, that you can leverage the existing vegetation that's propagating on the landscape. And, we've been transplanting a lot of rose hips and raspberry shrubs in the past 2 years. We do the aspens as well because those are one of the first tree species, and we can actually get some canopy off of those. Plus, they provide tremendous forage for beaver. But the most prolific natural resource propagation we do is probably willow planting. They're easy. You can cut them, you can trim them, you just stick them in the ground more or less. There's seasonality and specifics to do it. But really leveraging, I think the vegetation is something that now that we've stabilized a lot of the stream, despite these big flood events, that vegetation is something that you can really work with on the natural material side. And again, if you keep track of the materials, we have our youth plugs, our youth crews just dig up shovel clumps full of grass plugs in areas that have a lot of grass and bring those down to the floodplains and just, sporadically place them. And then they already have seed stalks on them and stuff, and they're naturally propagating in the fall, and you're really accelerating that recovery process. But if you keep track of the quantities of these materials, again, in-kind contributions, there's value. If you're going out into a nursery and buying those and paying a contractor to come in, like that's a lot of money. So if you're doing it yourself or you're doing it with small crews, it works well. Thanks. Russell, question?
Yeah, for sure. Great presentation and awesome to see how you guys are doing things over there. And this is not necessarily a question, but maybe more of a suggestion. Thinking about like the Yurok tribe, which is creating in-house engineering and construction skill sets, and then also something that we were starting to set up with the Umatilla Indians when I was working there. Have you guys considered? I know that you said like your contractor was like trying to put these precast bridges on you. of potentially finding a pathway to begin to move those skill sets within the tribe itself to build out like a construction firm or consulting firm that is tribe owned and run, because you guys seem to have kind of like are getting near a closed loop process there with using local materials, using low engineering solutions and process based. I just wonder if you guys have potentially like thought about that or.
We have, and we've discussed it with that development corporation I mentioned, the Santa Clara Development Corp. And the CEO right now is really focused on structural like buildings right now. But we've talked to him about, hey, can we get a mobilized crew that could do this? His concern is then there's departments of special projects and forestry, and everybody's doing their own thing. Um, I think it's on the horizon. I just don't think it's on the short-term horizon. The biggest limitation is capacity. Hiring, even once like they're having trouble just finding project managers for the work they have going now. Trying to get them to expand and do something new is it's almost like pulling teeth out of the lion when they're everybody's just trying to stay afloat and move forward as is. And we see that with a lot of tribes, but also tribes that have the capacity. So in our case, we found, the Ute Mountain tribe has a construction corporation, what is it, Weminuche Construction Authority. I asked if they're available to work in California because I know there's efforts out there as well, and they are. They are bonded and licensed, and these guys are proficient, man. They come in, they have half Navajo crew, half multi-tribes, and they come in and they do great work. They do it quickly, they're efficient. They sub restoration experts, and I'm all for recommending people like that. So right now, it's a lot more efficient to contract somebody like that who's already got it, and keep poking at the lion to see if that CEO can evolve over time.
That's cool, man. Awesome. Good work.
Thanks. Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to present today, and feel free to reach out to me anytime with questions or if you want eyes on a project. Happy to take a look.
We're happy to have you. Thank you so much. And yeah, please let me know if you want any more questions, Garrett. Garrett, it's all right if I circulate your email with the.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you again, Garrett. And safe travels to your next adventure.
Thank you. And you're welcome to share the presentation if people request it too.
Yeah, thank you. If you want to send it my way, let me know. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. So thank you again. Um, and so let's move on to our standing items, which is having updates for projects. 1 second. All right. So for prioritized restoration projects, let's start with Cal Trout first and Rose Valley and Harvey Diversion.
Hey, Elizabeth. Yeah, thanks for having a meeting. Give everyone an update on the Harvey Diversion project or Rose Valley. Start with Rose Valley. We just closed out the NIFWIP grant, which was originally meant to secure final designs and full permitting for leading and implementation. Unfortunately, those back-to-back years of flood and then the need to update and modernize the heliport out there resulted in us having pretty much final admin plan sets, but we need to get a little bit more funding to do the design and geotech necessary to update the heliport. So looking for funding to finish that out presently with the Forest Service, and hoping that we can make that happen here, relatively soon, because we did make the program of work for this project for this year, which is pretty important when you're working with Forest Service because they actually can then have time to devote to reviewing project documents and doing comment and review on stuff. So I'm trying to make that happen in the coming year, but certainly continuing to pursue the watershed-scale restoration effort out there at Rose Valley. Super important. For Harvey Diversion, that one is, I think people are quite familiar with the fact that Cal Trout's been trying to lead that project now going on 10 years. We do have, pretty critical update in the sense that of the total project cost, which is about 45 million, Cal Trout has or is in the process of finalizing grant agreements for about half of that, up to about 27 million. But I will say that, looking at the names that are on here, individuals that are engaged around the county, around the watershed. The critical path right now is the long-term operation and maintenance that's associated with this project. We don't have a federal nexus after construction. And so we need to find an entity, an organization, NGO or county or state that is interested to accept those requirements and those obligations to be a part of the HCP. Until we have that kind of squared away, we're kind of at a standstill point till we have those kind of relationships solidified. And so I would encourage you, whoever you're working for or working with, if that sounds like something you're interested in, please reach out. I'll add that as well is that CalTrout's in the process of creating a structured holding account that's going to have some money obligated to it from the Santa Clara River Trustee Council that'll be specifically for the organization that takes on the long-term management to use to do the long-term operation and maintenance that's going to be prescribed in the O&M in the HCP. And so we don't know exactly what that total is, but a bunch of conversations with the trustee council. They want to support it through that manner. They see that as a critical path. And we're also working with some other private donations and private foundations to try and build out that fund to make this, not as much of a lift by any organization. But we do have, done some cost calculations and projections and kind of understand what the potential is for what this role would require. So again, if that's something that anyone on here thinks they want to talk about or has ideas about or something that people could be interested in for the group they represent, I am all ears because right now it's kind of where the rubber meets the road. We got a whole bunch of money secured to remove what would be, it's Harvey diversion. It's a dam, essentially. It would be a 35-foot dam that we could restore access and ecosystem processes for one of the most principal tributaries in the Santa Clara River. So I would encourage any kind of thoughts or anything there. And then also update, CalTrout's been working with Kohler Winery in the Zaca Creek up in the San Ynez. They're super receptive and eager to do a fish passage restoration project on their property. I was even called out there a week before last to meet the original owner of Kohler, or the owner of Kohler. He flew in from Vegas, was doing some stuff and wanted to chat. And so we're putting together grant applications to put forward a alternative analysis and feasibility assessment for a fish passage structure on their property. It would be rescale restoration as well. And so pursuing restoration opportunities in the San Ynez Basin as well in the tributaries below Bradbury Dam, which is pretty important considering the likelihood of getting passage past Bradbury in a meaningful time frame when it comes to the potential threat of extinction for southern steelhead needs to happen pretty quickly. So that's another highlight point. I think that's about it, Elizabeth. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And also on this call, we have some people who will be partnering with us in social outreach, which is the Santa Barbara Fly Fishing Club. Mark is right there. Mark, you can go ahead. Just say a little bit because we're pressed for time. Oh, Mark, I think you're muted. If you could unmute.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to let you know that the Santa Barbara Fly Fishing Club and our Conservation Committee in particular is working with Russell and Elizabeth and CalTrout on the Kohler Winery project. And we are planning a fly fishing film event at the Libero Theater in Santa Barbara on March 9th. And that event will be an all-day event at the theater with an early afternoon panel discussion to introduce both southern steelhead to our community here in the Santa Barbara region, as well as to introduce and discuss the Kohler Winery project. So that panel discussion will, I think, start somewhere around 12:30 to 1 o'clock. We don't have that firmly set yet, but it will run probably 2 hours between the presentation of the panelists as well as questions and answers. The goal of this is to begin to beat the drum, so to speak, with the community in general about the importance of recovering southern steelhead, particularly in our watershed and in particular the Santa Ynez River system, because it was the largest river system that had the greatest return of southern steelhead in its entire region. So I'm working to try to do an outreach with Chumash tribe. I'm going to be in contact with you, Russell, as well as Elizabeth, on being part of that panel. We understand that the Kohler Winery wants to be a part of the event on the 9th of March as well. So all of you who are interested in Southern Steelhead might want to come up and spend the day with us in Santa Barbara on March 9th. Participate with us in the panel discussion as well as enjoy the evening movies. They will be quite interesting. They're fly fishing focused, but certainly steelhead are a major player for fly fishermen in general. So it was a great event last year. We did it for the first time ever, and not last year, this year actually, early this year. And to our surprise, we sold out the Libero Theater for 600 people. So we're hoping that we could get some set of that, maybe 200 or so, that could come to our panel discussion and get Southern Steelhead introduced to the community.
Yeah.
My long-term goal in all of this would be to have Santa Barbara and maybe Santa Barbara County adopt Southern Steelhead as their fish of focus going forward to recovery. So
Yeah,
that's it
thank
for me.
you. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and we're very happy to have you guys as our outreach partner for the community for this project. So more updates as we go along the road. We're very happy to start going in on that, and I'll be doing the grants for that too. All right. Thank you. Okay, and let's start with our next prioritized project, and that is City Ventura and others about the Santa Clara Estuary. Is anybody here to give an update on that? Like I said, I think it's near the holidays, so some people are able to make it. Okay, anybody from the Wishatoyo that are able to have some updates for us about their Vern Freeman Passage Project and the Watershed Monitoring Program?
Yeah. I don't know if there is nobody from City Ventura, I might also be able to talk about their
That works.
project, but yeah, I mean there I think there was a slight setback on their installation of a membrane bioreactor for their tertiary treatment plant, but once that goes in, that dramatically reduces their nitrate discharges, which will reduce nitrate loading in the Santa Clara River estuary. And of course, the Ventura Water Pure project, they're working on their pre-construction assessment and monitoring in the Santa Clara River estuary. But yeah, I think the first phase is probably going to be first phase is in like reducing their discharge to Santa Clara River estuary down to 1.9 mgd. Will probably be done by 2026, 2027. And then we're still looking at the full project probably being done between 2030 and 2032 for a 90% reduction of their discharge into the Santa Clara River estuary. So pretty big victory for the Santa Clara River. And we'll increase salinity variability for native species like smolts and tidewater goby, and just generally improve water quality in general and reduce impacts from the raised water level equilibrium. For which I'm sorry, before I keep going, Garrett had his hand up, and I know he's got more of a time constraint.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just not sure whether Garrett still wanted to talk. He's put his hand down. So sorry about that, Garrett.
No worries. It wasn't critical. I didn't want to I already took too much time. I just wanted to say that I am thrilled to hear there's a winery engaged on fish habitat restoration and passage. It's something I've been personally working toward in Oregon right now, trying to get these private landowners that own such a vast array of land along the coast ranges from Ventura to the Columbia, if not into Washington as well. And they typically are into sustainability initiatives. They often have more money than private landowners to pursue those. So I'd be really interested in talking with you, Russell, just about what funding sources you've identified for that. And there's another project, I think Jackson Family Wines did one up in Sonoma County that was quite successful. And that was the only one I found so far. So anyways, just kudos and applause and thanks again. No
Yeah.
And
question.
I just realized that Vince is on. Sorry, Vince.
No, you summed up our projects perfectly. So thank you for that. Couldn't get my
Sorry,
camera to
Vince.
work, and yeah, my audio was messed up. So yeah, Tevin really summarized our update that we're doing now. We've already begun construction on our ocean outfall pump station, which will divert the the wastewater effluent that currently flows into the Santa Clara River estuary and divert it out to the ocean outfall. That is a phased approach that we're doing, so we're still a long way from our end game of going to indirect potable reuse for that effluent. But as of right now, we are moving forward, and as Devin said, we're looking to in the 2026 timeframe to actually start the diversion from the estuary out through our ocean outfall pump stations. So that's pretty much it. Thanks, Devin. Or Tevin, appreciate it.
Sorry about that, Vince. I missed your name in the sea of names, so I apologize for that.
No worries.
All right, Russell.
I wasn't expecting to speak, so I was kind of
Uh,
like, okay.
you were blindsided anyways. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Russell.
thank you.
Vince or Tevin, and you guys might not answer this, but just because you guys are working in the estuary, have you either of you happen to hear anything from state parks about the progress on the other side of the estuary for McGrath State Beach? If anyone was going to see anything, it might be you two, just through communication, through coordination with them for the work you're doing.
It's been a few years since we spoke about the progress that they're doing. I know that they were planning on building a new campground and moving it a little bit farther south from the actual Santa Clara River. So, and during that update, there was no funding, and they were still about 10 years out, roughly, is what I was told from state parks.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, so back on track, Tevin.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go so fast. This is just on
Okay.
United.
That's
It's
okay.
nothing good. But yeah, this is concerning our case against the United Water Conservation District and the Vern Freeman diversion, which is the diversion dam on the Santa Clara River near Satacoy, in between Satacoy and Santa Paula. This is a pretty much complete impassable fish passage barrier. I think like 2 adults passed it in like 2022. We sued them. We won in 2018. They were court ordered to uh, construct a new fish passage structure, which they have now gone with the hardened ramp, which we're excited about. And they were also required to come up with a better flow regime plan for bypass flows to allow for migration through the critical riffle of the Santa Clara River, which is a really very wide and shallow reach below the dam, kind of near the 101 bridge over the Santa Clara River. It's kind of been a nightmare the last couple of months. They submitted a ITP application, an HCP, to NOAA Fisheries, and it was well, I don't know, excuse my language, it was dog shit. And it's actually the very first time that an ITP application has ever been denied on substantive issues in the history of the Endangered Species Act. So NIPS also shares my opinions. So we went to court, and they have to reapply. They're probably just going to copy and paste and then sue NIMS for an arbitrary and capricious decision. They also refused to submit an ITP application to the state because now steelhead, of course, are a state-listed species under the California Endangered Species Act. The court did require that they submit an ITP application to the state, so that's coming in, I don't know, 90 days or so. And now we're filing a motion to modify the injunction to include the NIMS suggestions on bypass flows. United contends that 160 CFS through the lower Santa Clara River is enough to pass steelhead. That's not really enough for half foot of water through the critical riffle. As some of you guys may know, steelhead need probably at least 0.7 feet to migrate. And that's, I think, a very minimal estimate. And through the critical riffle with new analysis, that's probably going to be closer to 500 CFS to actually pass and allow for migration for steelhead. United is refusing this, and the court, it seems our judge and special master have never heard of TVA v. Hill, and are starting to see more prioritization for water in the area. We do have a lot of saltwater intrusion in our groundwater, and the judge is getting more and more concerned about that rather than actual, the survival of steelhead. So this is a pretty big battle. Not very good news right now, but we're filing another motion with the court. We're probably going to be filing a contempt motion when United copy and paste their application. Anyways, sorry, not a very good update, but that's it for the United Water Conservation District. Our watershed monitoring program is going well. We are hopefully working with Cal Trout soon on developing some plans for some eDNA sampling and paired with flow monitoring in Santa Paula Creek and then the lower Santa Clara River. That's still pretty early on in our talks though. And then other than that, the wintertime is usually a break from Steelhead work for us. We're doing a lot of Clean Water Act litigation and prep for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Tevin. Okay. Okay, so next, is there anybody from the Friends of Santa Clara River here today that would like to talk about their Santa Creek fish passage remediation project? I can wait a little bit longer on this one. Okay, I don't think I recognize anybody from that. So we'll move on. And again, jump in if anybody wants to talk about that. Okay. Anybody from the Santa Clara River Conservancy want to talk about the SESP Cienega Restoration Public Access Project? Update? I think there wasn't a lot of update that they said at the last meeting. And I know Friends of Santa Clara River had found a new person to take over the project for Cesar last time. Okay. Anybody from the UC Santa Barbara River Lab talk about watershed-wide erosion management or their groundwater dependent ecosystem hydrology study? Okay. I'm gonna keep going just because we're pressed for time, and I think some people would like to do some announcements. Is anybody from the Nature Conservancy that wants to talk about the Santa Clara River Nature Preserve? Alyssa. Do you have any updates you'd like to give us?
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, so regarding the Santa Clara River Preserve, unfortunately during the mountain fire, Santa Clara River Preserve unfortunately took a pretty big hit. Did have a lot of damage from the fire. There was fire suppression repair that happened post-fire, but there will be a lot of weed management that will happen in this upcoming season following the rains. We already have arundo popping back up on the property very quickly. So that'll just be a concerted effort from the Nature Conservancy to get all that sort of taken care of. And hopefully we'll be able to reopen in the beginning of 2025. It'd be really interesting for folks to be able to get out there and see the progress and watch it transform over time. Concerning some of our restoration planning that we have ongoing at two of our properties. At the Hansen property, we have just received like a conceptual design for some of our off-channel wetlands that we're hoping to implement. And now we're negotiating a proposal for like a 10% design and then a subsequent 30% design. At our AC Growers site, so this is kind of also an update for Santa Clara River Conservancy. So they received funding to do some initial restoration on the AC Growers site. And so they've started that. And at our Bandman site, we did start restoration on like 40 acres, primarily around removal and then passive recruitment of native species. And so that'll be ongoing for the coming months, weather dependent. And then UCSB actually received, I think, about 1.2 million to do an additional 50 acres of restoration on that property as well.
Wow, fountain information. Thank you very much. You kind of covered three groups that weren't able to make it today. All right. So we will have time for open discussion. Yay. I've been trying to get that to you guys. We've had some really great talks though. So it's good to sacrifice just a little bit of our open discussion for some great talks. So in this open discussion, we're also looking for anyone who wants to help with project proposals or grant applications. Again, this is a service that I can provide. There's no charge. Somebody asked me if I charge for this. I can help you write grants, put my time to it, and it's no cost to you. It's funded by CDFW. So also, if you have any organizational handouts that you want to send to me just when I table, I'm always tabling, as you can see. If there's any public engagement events you'd like me to attend, meetings, updates, all fair game to tell everybody at the meeting. And then again, next meeting is March 12th. All right, so let's go again. If anybody has any thoughts they'd like to bring out to the meeting right now, please go ahead.
Hey, Elizabeth, I'll lead off if no one
Okay.
else has anything to share at the moment.
And then Brian can go after you if that's all right, Brian. Go
Awesome.
ahead.
Hey, everyone. For those who haven't met, my name is Pete Deneen. I'm the executive director of Keep the Sassby Wild. I took over the organization earlier this summer, and I'm still in the basement doing nuts and bolts changes of the organization. But as it were, we have events ongoing that we need to address. So building the airplane while we're in flight. I went up to San Francisco last month for our federal appeal hearing with Los Padres Forest Watch, our co-plaintiff. The hearing is over Pine Mountain, and I'm sharing it with this group because Pine Mountain comprises the headwaters of Sespe Creek, and the work that's being proposed up there is it's a relatively small project. It's a 755-acre fuels reduction project, which will involve thinning out of 300 plus acres of old growth conifer forest and some 400 plus acres of old growth chaparral. And this work will involve heavy machinery. It will involve impacts like erosion, invasive species encroachment, habitat fragmentation, to list a few. This was our final legal recourse. The 3-judge panel ruled in favor of the government in this case about 2 weeks ago. They handed down the ruling. They didn't really get into the actual arguments of the case. They issued a pretty cursory ruling, siding with the government and greenlighting the project to move forward. So Keep the Sassy Wild and Los Padres Forest Watch, in conjunction with Patagonia Action Works and some other partners, are rolling out an effort right now to try and collect as many petition signatures as possible as a sort of a community flex and show of muscle that we, despite the legal ruling, are determined to throw a Hail Mary and see if we can lean on our local Congress members to engage with the Forest Service in a sort of last-ditch effort to at the very least modify the project and agree to some restrictions that will mitigate and limit some of the impact, and obviously with the hope of potentially stopping the project. So in the near term, I will post in this chat a link to Los Padres Forest Watch's petition. We have a few hundred signatures there already, but would be super grateful for you guys to share with your groups, with your networks. And we want to get as much community support on that petition as possible. I really don't think the Forest Service wants a showdown on Highway 33 in the opening months of 2024 as this work starts. And I think coming to some sort of agreement without, an extrajudicial agreement to try and limit the scope of this project. So please share. We're going to be hosting a town hall on Pine Mountain in Ojai at the newly opened Ojai Playhouse Theater, likely sometime in January. So we're hoping to fill the house then, and I'll look out for an invitation for that upcoming. We'd love to have as many of our partners there as possible. Perhaps particularly, especially those groups that you wouldn't necessarily think would be on the side of the fence of these groups, like our local hunting groups, certainly our fishing groups, folks like that. So thank you very much, and more from me on that forthcoming soon. Thank you.
Yeah,
and looking forward to meeting you all in person as well.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, and I will add that to our wrap-up email. Okay, Brian, sorry to skim over that, Pete, but trying to get everybody in here as much as possible. Brian, please go ahead.
Yeah, hey everybody, I'll be real quick. I'm Brian Troutwine with the Environmental Defense Center, a nonprofit public interest environmental law firm, and give a quick update on our efforts to get releases from Twitchell Reservoir down the Santa Maria River to facilitate upstream steelhead migration to get up into the Sisquoc River, which, as you probably all know, is excellent spawning habitat. So we've been in litigation, and the latest is that the Bureau of Reclamation released a draft environmental assessment under NEPA that describes the proposed increased releases, and it didn't meet our expectations from what we had talked about with the Bureau throughout the litigation and settlement process. So we submitted comments that were somewhat critical, as did National Marine Fisheries, and just wanted folks to know we're still working on getting those releases from Twitchell Reservoir down the Santa Maria River on behalf of our client, Los Padres Forest Watch.
Thank you. And let me know if you want me to send any more information about that, Brian. Is there anybody else who would like to have any more updates or announce anything or ask for assistance in anything?
Hi, I'll chime in here real quick after Brian on the Santa Maria. It's a Step Wall Creeklands Conservation. Our project footprint is from Monterey down to Ventura. And we have started some programming within the community of Santa Maria with Santa Barbara County Action Network. We have received and now have finished a Cal EPA grant, a couple of Rose Foundation grants, as well as a whale tail grant, and are continuing with SBCAN to do restoration with Channel Islands folks to do riverbed restoration where homeless encampments have been removed. So lots going on in the Santa Maria, especially planning for water quality improvements on Orchid Solomon Creek with the RCDs, NRCS, and hopefully a wetland treatment project in the future to work on that very severe water quality degradation in Orchid Solomon Creek. That's it.
Thank you very much. And again, if there's anything you'd like us to send, just email me stuff. Okay. If anybody wants to do another one more update, we have about 4 minutes. If not, I'll be sending everybody on their way and wishing you a happy new year and happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yeah, happy holidays, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and please email me if there's anything else you'd like to be that you missed a chance about speaking to today.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
All right.
you.
Bye, everybody.